Good morning, everybody. This is Paul Benyon. I am going to be walking you through benchmarking today. And as we get started, we've had a few notes about our audio. And if you just wanted to double check it one more time before we jump in, if you could just put in a quick note if you hear me okay or if the audio still needs a little tweaking before we get started. We'll just look for a note or two before we start. Okay, I'm getting notes that we're good. So a little introduction about myself. I am the Director of Training at Hard Dollar Corporation. This is my 9th year here. I'm responsible for the training of all new employees, and also I've successfully conducted training programs for many of the large international companies that we work with. And I enjoy teaching the best practices to the best and brightest in the industry through live classroom instruction, also consulting, and one of the new things that we're rolling out that we're real excited about is the e-learning content that we're working with. So that being said, let's get started. So a little quick background about Hard Dollar. In case you don't happen to know who Hard Dollar is, we are a software company that specializes in project cost management. What we mean by that is we help organizations to be able to centralize all of their cost and their productivity information and then be able to leverage that information. So we primarily specialize in cost model estimating, measuring progress or project control, and also forecasting to completion. And we bring the different systems that you see there together into one platform to be able to do that. So again, just wanted to give you a little background about who we are. But let's set some expectations for today and for the next 40 minutes that we're going to be together. The agenda is going to go as follows. We're going to talk about the purpose of benchmarking. Then we're going to look at if you're implementing a benchmarking strategy for your business, what are the keys to be successful with that? Also, benchmarking obstacles. And last of all, we'll run through an example scenario so you can see if an organization is putting it in place, what it might look like. So to get started, you know, I am here in Scottsdale, Arizona, beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona. Love it here. The weather is wonderful, a little hot right now, but the beautiful desert is a great place to go mountain biking, and especially during the sunsets, as you can see here. And usually when I go out and ride, there's a lot of great trails around town. If you've ever been here, you would know it. And I like to keep track of my speed, my time, and as I'm going along, sometimes I will feel like I am just doing an amazing job. I'm going as fast as I think I can go, and I must say I feel really good about myself. But then, sure enough, someone will come along, and they will dash all of my hopes. They'll go flying by me, and suddenly I realize I was not the great speedy rider that I thought I was, and I end up feeling somewhat like a little kid that just got off his training wheels. So when it comes to benchmarking, what we are doing is we are giving ourselves something to compare against, because without that, you could be thinking you're doing great, or you could be doing horrible, but until you have some real information to go off of, it's just guesswork. You know, one of the renowned consultants in the business world, William Deming, said, you may feel super confident about how you're doing, but really, how do you know? And that's what benchmarking is all about. So benchmarking is, if you go to Webster's Dictionary, you're going to see this definition, a standard or point of reference against which things may be compared or assessed. So that's what we are going to be talking about today. Now this is, the whole idea of benchmarking in the business world really came to front and center around the late 80s with the manufacturing industry. There was an individual, Robert C. Camp. He put out an essay benchmarking the search for industry best practices that lead to superior performance, and really it took off in the manufacturing and production sectors. But more recently, in the last decade, we have seen it come into the project management realm, where it is generally considered a best practice to go ahead and try to benchmark your performance to either your own internal performance or to other companies in the industry. So we really are talking about two kinds of benchmarking. There's internal benchmarking and external benchmarking. And the external benchmarking, one really good example of that in the United States has been the Construction Institute, Construction Industry Institute, excuse me, CII, who have put out an initiative, started in '93, a goal to provide the industry a common set of metrics and to provide some performance norms. And they got a core set of indicators put together in 2000. Some of you may have participated in this. The idea is it's web-based. Participants fill out a questionnaire online. They make web-based updates during the duration of their project, and they put in benchmarking information that feeds in. And as of, this is going back a little bit, but as of 2004, one metric they had, over 1,200 projects were in that database, representing $60 billion in cost. So this became kind of a place to go to get a feel for how are we performing and looking and comparing against some of the best and brightest in the industry. So that's the external kind of focus of benchmarking. For the remainder of this course, we're going to be focused more on your own internal benchmarking. You certainly could go sign up with CII and do their survey and do the external kind of thing. But we're going to focus on what if you wanted to compare your projects to your own past performance. So let's take a look in that direction. So let's say you are just at the starting line getting ready to implement benchmarking in your organization. You really are fresh. There's nothing really in your history that's been benchmarked so far. What would you need to do to get started? Well, first and foremost, there's certain keys to success you're going to want to keep in mind as you're starting to set things up. First of all, you really got to have company buy-in. So at all the levels in the organization, without that, it's really not going to get off the ground. Secondly, you need to have access to the right information. So how can we get the right people to the right information in the easiest way possible? And this is the benchmarking information. And part of that is the last key to success, having some sort of a process in place to be able to collect that information and have it organized in a way that people can make sense of it and get a comparison and analysis out of it to make improvements for the current projects that you may be working on. So when it comes to company buy-in, as I mentioned, you really need buy-in at multiple levels in the industry. Particularly, that starts at the top. You have to have executive buy-in, and to get their buy-in, you need to help them to see the value. How will this help me meet my business objectives? Perhaps implementing benchmarking is going to help them be more profitable. Maybe there's been some issues with staying within budget with projects, and this will help them to see that they can save money, they can cut down costs because they can be more accurate with their estimates, and then they're going to be more inclined to buy into what it takes to get benchmarking in place. But top-down initiatives, they'll really fall on their face when the rubber hits the road unless you have a department-level champion, someone that will pick it up and run with it, because that's the person in the trenches that's really going to implement whatever strategy gets put forth by the upper-level management. So you really need an enthusiastic sponsor that's going to get the initiative going, get it off the ground, and make it happen. The executive also needs to understand that this is going to be a commitment of resources, man-hours, costs, but the payoff can be huge. Just imagine being able to go into any sort of bid review and be able to confidently say, this is how many cubic yards we can excavate per hour or per day, because we have seen over the past 20 times we've done it, we've been able to access that information, we know what we've actually done before. So now you have confidence moving forward that we're going to be able to stay within our costs, within our budget. All right, so the second key to success, having access to the right information. Where do you actually go to get that information? You know, think of your project history. How were you recording, or how are you recording your actual performance and your costs today? How do you get to that information? Now, this may feel pretty daunting. Maybe you have a big stack of binders like that, or maybe a stack of spreadsheets, if you will. All your project information scattered amongst Excel files. Well, the first step really is to establish a data repository. So this is a place where all of that information is going to get stored in one place. And the best practice is to get it into a database. So, you know, once you are in a computer system, you know, that's really the best way to handle this. Then you're going to be able to do searches and filters to get to the right information easily. But until you have it into that, you know, it's just scattered. You can't really leverage that information. Now, the second thing is good record keeping. So if you have a bunch of information in there, well, and it's just all garbage, well, garbage in, garbage out. It's not going to do much good for anybody. So, for example, if you're doing a lot of piping work and no one can find the right sizes and types of the pipe spools or the flanges and the other fittings needed, then no one's going to be able to use it. So how is that information going to be input? Who is going to get it in there? And then how will people get to that information? So these are kind of the big questions that have to get answered and get organized right from the get-go. The last thing is what to measure. What are we going to measure? We need commonly accepted, effective metrics for assessing project performance. That's really what we want to benchmark. So things like production, maybe man hours is the big measurement that you are looking at. How many man hours per unit, or how many units per man hour, depending on what kind of work you're doing. Costs, labor, equipment, material costs. The thing with costs, though, is the farther back you go in history, cost becomes less and less reliable, right? Because it can escalate. It changes over time. Whereas production productivity is less likely to change. And then last of all, you have other information. So let's jump to the next thing. So why would you need other information beyond productivity and costs? Well, let's say, for example, we're this skier. Now, the skier, it really depends on the context of where he is skiing. Context is everything. The skier's probably not going to have as much success skiing in the Sahara Desert. Probably die of heat stroke or something. When evaluating productivity information, you need to know the context around it to understand why it is that number. So things like accessibility. Whatever I'm building, a road, a bridge, doing excavation work, how easy was it to get to the job site? Things like the weather, season, time, soil conditions, the geography. Again, this may be information you want to store for activities in your project's database so that as you are looking at your benchmarking information, you have context around it. Now, let's just do an example with this. Let's suppose we're estimating a new bridge project and we want to look at benchmarking data from similar projects from the past. So as I review a couple of past projects, I noticed that the costs and the productivity, it's significantly different from one to the other. So I need to know, well, why would that be? I need that context that I was talking about. And until I have that information, I'm really left to guess why one would be so high or so low. So for the first bridge I look at, it's a box girder bridge over a freeway, and the production is significantly better than the second historic bridge project. The second one is a bridge over a river canyon. And like I said, the productivity and the cost, when I'm looking at that, on the freeway bridge, productivity a lot higher, cost a lot lower than on the canyon one. Well, why would that be? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, right? It's clear that accessibility is probably playing a big role here. First of all, the first bridge is close to the city. It's easy to mobilize all the equipment and the manpower to get to it. The second bridge is in the middle of nowhere, and it's also 100 feet higher. So when it comes to, for example, the concrete pouring activities, on the bridge that's being built in the city, the productivity is a lot higher because the pumper can get access to the bridge from both sides. It can pour directly to the bridge, whereas with the canyon bridge, pumper can only be accessed from one side. It has to use 100 feet of hose to get it clear across the deck to pour, and the construction crew has to handle that. It needs more manpower. They're going to be less productive. It's going to take longer to get it done. Also, things like soil conditions can play a role. The canyon walls are a lot harder to pile into than the soil conditions in the city. And so it's going to require a heavy-duty 10-inch flange rather than a regular one, which is going to be a cost difference. It's going to be a greater material expense. Yeah, things like weather. Perhaps the weather conditions here up in that canyon, it gets down to below freezing. You have to cover up all of your equipment, all the concrete. There's cost to that. And let's face it, you're not going to be as productive in 0 degrees as you are in 50-degree weather. So things like soil conditions, weather also can play a role. And that's the context that we want to document somehow so that we can take those into consideration as we're benchmarking. Now, to be successful, benchmarking should be implemented in a structured and systematic process. It shouldn't be random and hit and miss. And it's really got to become an integral part of your organization. So just like the measurements that you're doing for your project execution, you know, knowing how is your project progressing, you got to have that same kind of process in place for benchmarking. It's not going to be successful if it's applied in an ad hoc fashion or a random fashion. So in most cases, benchmarking is going to be best practice oriented, and it's part of a continuous improvement program. It's going to incorporate a lot of feedback, and it's going to require a lot of understanding of the organization. But you need more than just a few random data points, so it needs to be consistently tracked on your projects so that you can get beyond just 3 benchmarking data points. Here's an example. Here's a lot of data points. We got hundreds of them now. You might not have hundreds of projects, but the more project information that you're able to track, how do you actually perform, then that's going to have a huge payoff, pay big dividends later on, and you're really going to be able to get a big picture view of what is the best productivity or the best cost to go with. So here we see all these little data points are painting a picture for us. So what does it require? It requires a repeatable, a structured, and a systematic collection of that data. And finally, you can get to the real big picture. We can see all of those points make up this whole portrait. So having a consistent and standardized process, how do we accomplish that? Well, I've broken it down into 4 main steps. First of all, you need to determine what to benchmark. We've talked about that already. That's the first step. So the cost, the productivity, and the other information that you're gonna collect. Second is a big one, being able to develop a data collection methodology. If you think about it, like I mentioned before, garbage in, garbage out, how are we going to find some common ground to be able to compare off of? So think of a slot machine. You find 3 common denominators, and guess what? You win. Same thing with benchmarking. If you find the common code that you can track off of from one project to another, then you're going to win. you're going to be able to get the information that you are looking for. So here's an example. Let's say that we're doing some piling work. And piling, now I could just say, I want to track piling at the highest level. So from project to project, I want to compare piling. Well, that's good, but there's different kinds of piling. There's different sizes of flanges. So that's going to be a lot of variance from project to project. Well, so maybe I want to go one level deeper. I want to get a little more specific. Wood piling versus steel piling. That's going to give me a lot better idea. So instead of having to just kind of lump everything together, I can focus in on my steel piling and see how productive and how much does it cost us to install that, to drive that. And I could go even deeper and go by different sizes or whatever way makes sense for your organization to organize things. And this is the part that is really up to your company. Everyone's going to do it a little bit different. But the key is don't sell yourself short by going at too broad of a level, because then you're not really going to have good measurable information where you need it. The more detailed you can go, the better. Now, there's a balance there, because the more detailed you go requires more time, more resources to implement that. So one of the key best practices is, all right, if I'm going to compare these from job to job, I could compare it based on description. However, that's probably not a good idea, and you can probably see why. What if I call the 10-inch flange activity 10-inch flange, but the next person comes along and says, 10-inch pile? Now, when I go and try to mine that data later on and compare the two, I can't, because they're two different descriptions. When I go and search for a 10-inch flange, it's only going to find one and not two. So we've got to do the legwork at the beginning and just decide from the top down, guys, we're going to tag all of our activities with codes. And that is a huge, monumental task, but the payoff is enormous. Imagine if once you have codes assigned to all of this, I could say, search through my database, find all of the 5210 account code or cost codes. And then it will pull them all up and be able to give me high, medium, low benchmarking information. Okay? Now that's assuming that I'm using an automated kind of system. However, even if I was using an Access database or something like that, I could still pull that information using searches and filters and pull that information right up in front of me. Now I also need to be able to decide, how am I going to measure things when I'm comparing? What are the actual metrics going to be? What's the parameters? What do I feel comfortable with? So how far does a project need to be off track to be considered way off track? What's considered a red flag to you and your team? So maybe you feel if productivity is within 5 to 10%, that would be a yellow flag. And anything beyond that would be a red flag. So you're going to come up with the measurements that you want, because that's kind of the final step here is comparing performance. We're deciding, okay, we got all this good information now. We've done our due diligence. We've got our code methodology set up, so we've determined what to benchmark. We've developed the data collection. We've collected the data. Now we're looking at it and what's good, what's bad, and how are we measuring that? And that's really important, because you're not going to have time, those of you that would be consuming this information, especially the higher up you go, at the executive level, they're just going to want, a couple dials or some sort of a real high-level barometer that tells them, okay, these things are in the red. That's what we need to focus on. We don't have time to be down in the weeds in every little detail. So typically, the items that have the highest costs in the project, right, and also the most man-hours, they typically are the ones that are the most risk for the project. So a key best practice, focus on those high dollar items and the high man-hour items first. See if any of those have some red flags as you're comparing them. So we've gone through the keys to successful implementation of a benchmarking strategy. Now let's talk about a few of the obstacles that you can try to stay wary of. When it comes to external benchmarking, if you do go down that road where you want to be comparing to some of the best in the industry, using, for example, the CII database, you know, one of the fears is fear of exposure. You know, you don't want to give your trade secrets away. You don't want people maybe to see potential weakness that you have in your organization. So one of the keys there is that whatever external kind of database that you contribute to, it's got to be anonymous so that you don't have to worry about that. One of the biggest obstacles to benchmarking, believe it or not, is arrogance. Companies that say, you know what, we're so good, we don't need benchmarking. You know, that kind of goes against the mindset that we're always learning and we always can improve and always can get better. And the true leaders in the industry are going to have this established as a best practice. Also, ignorance. Perhaps, you know, there's other organizations that that just simply out of ignorance believe that either they don't know about benchmarking or they just don't believe that it can adequately address their needs. And so that becomes a training issue. That becomes an informing issue in the industry, letting people know what benchmarking can provide and how much it can help to decrease overrunning budgets and give just project confidence that's needed for project managers, estimators, executives, you name it. Probably the greatest barrier of all, though, is even those companies that are fairly bought in simply have a lack of resources. As we know, because of the big hit the economy has taken over the past number of years, there's been a sizing down of companies. Organizations are running just as productive in some cases, but a lot leaner than they were in the past. So dedicating some essential resources to a new initiative like this can be difficult, and there's no doubt about it. And so it just really comes to understanding the return on investment that this will give, and then just really making the commitment. One of the things that can be done is implementing and updating your computer systems to allow you to be able to benchmark effectively. And more and more as technology improves, it's going to become easier and easier for you to do so. So for the remainder of my time here before we open it up to questions, let's just walk through a little example construction company that's just getting started with benchmarking. So we have a company, XYZ Construction, and XYZ Construction, we create cost estimates and submit bids to a variety of clients. So I have Steve. He's chief estimator at XYZ Construction. Steve, he challenges his team of estimators. He wants them to come up with the ability to justify their assumptions in each of the estimates that they put together. He wants to know if similar work that has been performed at a similar rate in the past, if they are at a similar rate in the past, and if not, why not? So the estimating team gets to work. And to get started, first they got to figure out what are the key things that they want to benchmark. Okay? Once they've done that, we talked about coming up with that methodology of how are we going to track our items. So they start to define matching criteria for their like items. And within XYZ, there happens to have been account codes that have been standardized for years, been used company-wide for several years. So XYZ uses these account codes to come up and assigns them to their different construction activities that are typically used in their estimating and in their projects. So that's convenient for them. Now, it is possible using other means. You could even use description to benchmark your items. Just remember, there's some real pitfalls that can happen if you go with something else besides an account code or a cost code. Okay. So during the estimating phase of the project, Steve and his estimating team here, they start to determine which projects they want to target, that they want to use to benchmark, and use as a basis of comparison with their current projects that they're working on. So to do that, they realized that they had to start setting up, identifying certain criteria on their projects. So you can see kind of in the background there's some criteria, the job location, the job type. This is ways that they can classify their projects. So if you're looking at the entire universe of their projects, the universe that they work in, they want to be able to kind of slice and dice their data set. So maybe, for example, in earthwork projects, Steve would typically want to use projects in the same geographic area for comparison, since the soil conditions are probably the greatest impact on their performance, and it's going to be relatively the same in the same geographic area. But for industrial projects, the focus is more on whether they're union projects or non-union projects. So we want to be able to classify our projects in these different ways. This is a union project. So then I can say, I want to go and do a search for all of my union project data instead of looking at all of it at once. Okay, so as you can see, highlighting the examples there. Well, benchmarking scenario continues here. The next thing is to decide during the bid review meetings, how are we going to measure all this good information that we now have? So they've got this information in a database. They got it classified, the right data set. We're using codes to identify our items. Now we can compare the past 10 projects, how we've done. Well, do we want to just go and look at every item, or are we going to kind of try to prioritize this a little bit? And certainly we're going to. And we're going to also tag them with either a green, a yellow, or a red. In this case, this is how they did it. They said, okay, green items within 5%. If my current project is within 5% of the cost or the production rate of the average of my past projects, then I consider we're in good shape, we're right on track. But perhaps it's not. Perhaps it's 10% off, 20% off. Then those are going to be the things that show in red, and those are going to be the things I need to address, that I need to take into consideration. Okay, so that being said, we're going to just take a quick couple more minutes here. And as I mentioned, Hard Dollar, we are a software company. We do provide estimating and project controls. And we have benchmarking built into our tool. So let's just take a quick look here at what it looks like. So we're looking inside of Hard Dollar's project cost management tool. And I'm looking right now at some settings for benchmarking. So we talked about how can we decide out of all of our past projects, what projects are we going to look at? So this is where I would set up that kind of information. So notice it says, okay, I have a data warehouse, a database that exists that has all my projects in it, and I'm saying look at all of the history that I've captured of what we actually did. I've actually captured the production rates that we've actually performed on my past projects. Then, just like we talked about matching criteria, this is where I could go in and I could actually indicate what am I going to match on. Description, code, again, kind of best practice. Code is probably best, but I have a number of different criteria that I can match on. So clearing and grubbing in project ABC compared to project 1, 2, 3, I want to match them both up with the same code. Okay. And then I can also filter down. Maybe I just want to focus in on, in this case, I'm focusing in on maybe equaling a certain job type or location, whatever I would like. In this case, we're going to say the type, and maybe the type is site work or landfill work or whatever your organization would be doing. Okay, that's going to help me zero in on just the data that pertains to what I'm doing today. And then there's some other settings in here. This is where, again, hard dollars method, we do a green, yellow, red, like I was talking about before. This is where I set up what are the ranges that are acceptable for something to be considered in the green. It's within 5% is what this is saying, then 5 to 10% is yellow, and beyond 10% would be red. So once I have these settings set up, then I can go into my actual project. This is looking at my estimate and all the activities that are in my estimate. And you can see it tells me, it starts giving me information right away and highlighting and flagging for me things that are the most off from my benchmarks of the past. So what I would probably want to do is prioritize. So I'm going to say, all right, here's the total cost on all my items. What are my highest dollar items? So I'm going to sort this and put my highest dollar items at the top. So we can see here, all right, this asphalt concrete, for example, and this process equipment, really high, and it just so happens out of those high dollar ones that this asphalt concrete is high risk. I'm way off for some reason on my production. So I can then, that's where I would drill in and I could get an even more detailed view. For example, you can see the benchmarking information here where that square is my average and the triangle is my current. So on this particular item, I happen to be doing great. I'm right on. But as I start to look at other items and get more information, I can see that the diamond, my current project, is in the red. I am way off from what my average has been in the past. And we happen to be, in this case, measuring how many units per man-hour we're able to do. I can measure how many man-hours per unit, units per man-hour, or a number of other criteria. Okay? The beauty of this is the data is already there, and the system is able to pull it together for me, so I'm not going on a big search expedition every time. Oh, last thing we want to show is our reporting tool, Lasso, can take this even to the next level. So if I jump back to to our PowerPoints here. Here's an example report from Lasso where we can see we're able to compare our past projects, and each of these is representing my most recent projects or the projects in my data set, and I have them sized based on their cost. And I'm also getting location, geography at the same time. So with Lasso, it really opens things up because I can set up all very simple. And I can incorporate even geo mapping into it. So I get that context that we were talking about, that additional information to know why these projects are performing the way that they are or did. So that being said, we're going to jump back and just sum things up. So we talked about the purpose of benchmarking, why benchmark. Again, without a reference point or multiple reference points, we really can't know how we're doing. It gives us the confidence that we need to be successful. We then talked about the keys to success and the potential obstacles that you can run into, and then we walked through a basic scenario. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions that anybody may have at this time? Okay, so first question that has come up here is if you don't have a lot of benchmarking history, would you recommend entering past projects into your system manually? Yeah, I have run into this question before. The question is basically saying, okay, if you are implementing a system like Hard Dollar, let's say, and you want to start benchmarking, but you don't have any benchmarking data in there yet, does it make sense to go to some of your past projects and enter them in manually into the system? And the answer to that, I say yes to a point, because it is a tremendous amount of effort to take a past project and go and take a look at each of the activities in that project and understand the productivity in it and everything, and get that pulled in. So it can take anywhere from a man week to a man month to be able to pull that off. So you can do that. I would suggest doing it just for maybe the top projects. Kind of, you have a set of projects that you really think would be important to be comparing against. Maybe you have 5 of them or 10 of them. Get those entered in as a starting point, and then I would focus my efforts on just winning more work, and then from then on, each new project is going to be tracked in there and adding more and more data. Okay, another question has come up. Can you exclude particular projects from the data set of criteria? And yes, you can. You could, speaking for Hard Dollar, in HD you can exclude particular projects. You get to control what projects even get to be part of the benchmarking database. So you could say, I only want these 100 projects to go into the database. These other stragglers we're going to keep out of it. And then you're going to be able to do the filtering and the searching off those 100 projects that you want to be part of the database. Okay. Okay, I have another question that's come up about HD benchmarking in particular. The question was, is HD benchmarking part of estimating, or can it use other estimating system imports? So it is part of HD estimating, so you would need to have an estimating license in order to use benchmarking. To get started, say you did shift and decided, yeah, it makes sense to use the HD estimating license. We do have some good import mapping to be able to pull in from other systems if you wanted to work on converting your data over to HD. And then another question, how many projects do you need to get a valid standard for reference to benchmarking? Okay, well, the more the better, obviously. You know, it's going to be somewhat subjective. The answer I would give is, what do you feel comfortable with? I would say even if you had just a few in there, that's better than nothing, because you certainly can see, all right, the last few times, this is what we've been able to accomplish. Okay, yeah, and I see a little update there. Minimum, yeah, I would say 3 minimum. Great, I really appreciate all the questions. And if there are no further questions, we will go ahead and wrap things up. So some next steps for you guys. This is CEU Webinar, meaning that upon completion of this quiz that you'll be able to get your CEU credit. So this is what we'll do. We're going to email you a link to the quiz following this session. And then upon completion of that quiz, we will send out the certificates to you. Now, please give us 5 business days to be able to get those certificates out to you, but they will be coming your direction. And last of all, HD training. We do want to keep you in the know. If you do happen to be an HD user or interested in learning more about HD, here are some of the upcoming events that we have. First of all, we did want to, Tony mentioned it right at the beginning of the webinar. We wanted to mention it again. We're super excited about the PCM Roundup, Project Cost Management Roundup that we do every year. It's going to be this coming February 2014 at the Scottsdale Plaza Resort. Come and enjoy Arizona at the best time of year and learn and be able to collaborate and get with other clients and the best in the industry. Come join us. It's going to be a great time. We hope you're able to come. You can also see there's some E101 and 201 courses that we're offering over the next few months. The next CEU webinar coming up, Principles in Project Cost Management, going to be June 26th. We welcome you to attend. And last of all, we're really excited to unveil our e-learning center, where we have interactive courses that you can purchase. They're just $195. They're about an hour long, and they cover basic hard dollar training. Right now, you can see the courses available: budget management, rational forecasting, and benchmarking. So if you want to learn how to benchmark in hard dollar, you can jump right in there. That's accessible from our website, harddollar.com. So we thank you for attending our benchmarking introductory course, and I'm going to pass it back over to Tony.
That's great, Paul. Thank you very, very much. It was an outstanding presentation. We appreciate your time this morning. And again, we would like to remind you that you will be receiving your quiz and the slides via email, likely tomorrow. Once you do submit the quiz to us, again, as Paul mentioned, please give us about 5 business days to get your certificate to you. And again, we do appreciate all of you joining us. You can find more information on today's presentation and everything else about Hard Dollar and our project cost management system at harddollar.com. Again, thank you all very much for joining us, and we will talk to you and see you next month.